I was interested in preserving biodiversity. So my clients were like the Nature Conservancy. They were other land management units or nonprofits that were interested in protecting rare species and the habitats where they were found. So I started saying, looking at mapping what was left. And then, okay, so you start going, why is this plant species here? Why is this habitat here? What are the habitat characteristics? What kind of soils are associated with it? What's the hydrology associated with that? Are they near springs? Are they near streams? Are they on a north-facing slope or a south-facing slope? So what you started to realize that these refugia occur, they have a distinct set of abiotic criteria that explain why the biotic components are there. And as the temperature rises, these areas will shrink and they'll go into places like north-facing slopes associated with springs, and they'll hang on to there. Refugia is an important model for why plants are where they are, and that they're also helpful in predicting what we're going to do with climate change. Because the story of North America is one of climate change since the glaciation and then the post-glacial time. And so the modern distribution of plants that we see now, like the biomes, the tall grass prairie, the eastern deciduous forest, the pine forest, the tundra, all these big biomes are determined by modern climate. Now people will say, oh, well, we've had climate change in the past. You know, we've had oscillations of 4 to 6 degrees Celsius on average for the region. But we're talking about that kind of change in not over 1,000 years, but in 100 years. And the only way I think that we can protect biodiversity is focusing on the areas like where springs are, in rough terrain, north-facing slopes, you know, or in the case of dry stuff, south-facing slopes, rocky slopes. And it's these small little vestiges, these little refugia, that's where biodiversity has to be protected.
It ain't rocket science to know that the water is the thing here. And riparian areas and aquatic systems are rare, yet they're the most heavily impacted of any place on the landscape. And you know, the Aldo Leopold thing of save all the parts, of keeping as many parts as we can and to bring back parts that have been extirpated. And the different trophic levels of organisms need to be part of a healthy functioning system. And so the concept that you were asking about refugia and thinking about the Gila in that sense, I've looked at it from the scale of all of the lower 48 as refugia, and anything south of the Laurentide Glacier as a refugia. But of course, you can only talk about refugia in the sense of scale. At what level are you looking at that? Refugia here, in a time of still very underappreciated, serious shit is going on, serious stuff. And maybe we're beyond so many tipping points that we're on a point of no return. So how will things fare here? You know, the predictions of mega drought and so forth here, and how will things go in our Gila River, our home? We already have a hugely damaged river system here. Again, the Gila is very rare just because it's a free-flowing river and a permanent flows. And anything that jeopardizes that takes away the parts, that jeopardizes the aquatic systems, is wrong. And you can call it keeping a refuge or not, but any work that keeps the system resilient and tied together is what needs that we keep working at. It's very clear, and we know this, but it's very clear looking at this archaeology stuff, the perfect wave of impact was from 1860s on here. It was devastation, primarily because of livestock. There are a lot of human activity going on, extractions and people moving into these bottomlands where the water is and agriculture and so forth. Our saving grace was having Apaches live here. Unfortunately, we killed them all or moved them. But if it wouldn't have been for the Apaches holding at bay the Anglo impact, we'd have even less than we do now, I think. So 1860s on, the impacts were catastrophic, and I'll lay it right on it's the introduction of livestock into these systems were the biggest devastation. And again, you're working towards those feral cattle. That's something we could control and we should control. And it's insane. Anytime I see cattle in the bottomland, I'm torqued. I have a hard enough time here looking at the landscape and seeing the cup half empty versus half full. I wrestle with that daily, because you look at it, if you have any sense of ecological sense, it doesn't take much to see the destruction. But again, our aquatics and our riparian systems are the special places that have to be, whatever it takes for us to keep those protected. The only hope we have in a rapidly changing climate is to have intact ecosystems as close as we can and as large as we can get them and as connected, interconnected as we can make them. You look at, like Gila trout strategy has been to try to keep them alive and have isolated refugia when forest fires happen and systems get destroyed by the resulting runoff from those fires. If all your eggs are in one basket, they're gone like that. So how many eggs can you have around there? And so that sense of refuge is absolutely critical, especially as we're in unprecedented times in ecological earth change here. And I'm fairly familiar with all the extinction times going back to the Permian. This one's unprecedented in the impact of human beings on this planet. There are so many of us, and it cannot sustain. Any talk of sustainability is an illusion. So in that sense, again, keeping as much intact, that's what we have to do. That's what has to be done. And it's surprising how oblivious most people are to the natural world and do not have a connection. I may be a country kid trapper, but that relationship, that intimate relationship, is where caring comes from. I don't see it any other way. So young people getting out in the woods and doing this stuff is absolutely critical, because you got to care about it. And to foster care is experiential. There's no other way around it. You know, you had asked in one of your questions there about experience in the north, and I've spent a lot of time in northern Alaska. And to see what's going on, I've always thought that the bellwether is the oceans, and seeing what's going on in the oceans now, especially in the northern Pacific, and seeing the Bering Sea and the Arctic going without ice and the ice seals and all that fauna disappearing. It's just pain. But at the same time, we live a life that's short, and we all know we're going to die, and we live hopefully from day to day seeing beauty and joy, and knowing that we're not going to be around very long. And with a deep time history, you can guarantee that things are not going to stay the same ever, and they're going to be punctuated events that threaten a whole planet.